Sure.
All right, we are live.
Okay.
Should
Excellent.
be. All right, folks. This is another episode of Kicking It with Kickstand. I'm Kickstand, or Tyler. I have Peter Overton. He is one of the co-creators of Twisted. It is a skirmish steampunk game. So thanks for joining us, Peter.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I should say good morning to you. You're all the way from Australia, so it's about 9 in the morning.
Yeah, 9 a.m. in the morning. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Hold on 1 second. I got somebody asking for a link.
That's right.
My internet sometimes slows down when I've got one of my doors shut. My internet kind of slows down sometimes. But anyway, I guess while I'm still kind of getting a link out, kind of tell us, your background. Like, what is your background in gaming?
Okay. Well, probably, I guess it started initially with my brothers and I. I'm the youngest of three brothers. We used to play war games with little Airfix plastic models, the ones, HO scale ones, little tiny ones. So I used to do Polyonics and World War IIs, all the stuff that was around in the sort of late 70s, I guess. But kind of even then, I was keen to explore the character of the models, I guess, and I always used to pick one. That's my favourite soldier. This is, Sergeant Smith, and he's going to be the greatest one. Blah, blah, blah. From that point, I kind of got into painting minis. If you paint them up, play with them, it's more fun. Slipped into D&D in the late 1979 was my first game of D&D, so it's quite a long time ago.
Right.
Played that for years. Got into painting minis through that more often because you wanted to paint your characters up. So pretty much stayed playing D&D and painting minis probably till the late 90s. Just tinkering with that and enjoying it. Sort of painting was my real sort of passion at the time because I entered the Golden Demons a bit, got a few of those, which was fun. But then kind of I found the French game Confrontation, which I loved the miniatures for. They were some of the best, and probably still are some of the best miniatures available. That's only a small war game, like 10, 12 models aside. So I thought, I can play this because I'd never bring myself to paint an army because I'm the kind of guy that paints timber on the back of every shield, that kind of thing. I just can't half do things. So I got into that game. From there into a bunch of other skirmish games and kind of floated around that area for a couple of years, playing a few bits and bobs. A lot of them sort of, I guess, died for one reason or another. Confrontation did some very silly things and closed themselves down. Another one I played also closed down. And from that point, I kind of, at about that stage, that's when Twisted arose as an idea. And I've kind of been in that ever since, essentially. So just working along through getting that developed and added to the market as a game, which is good.
Right. So I was gonna, you talking about your game. So what was the inspiration? Like why the steampunk setting?
Steampunk setting. Okay. Well, initially we had a meeting up in Sydney with Sebastian and I and a couple of other guys who were involved at the time. The first thing we were thinking of doing was actually a magazine, like a painting magazine, but that didn't really pan out for one reason or another, and it wasn't going to work. And almost on that same day, we thought, well, let's do a war game instead, a small-scale skirmish game, because that's what I liked. And if I was going to be writing the rules for it, I wanted to write the rules for a game that I would like, which is, Sebastian Archer, my partner.
Right.
He'd been sculpting miniatures for a few years, and he had a range called the Guild of Harmony, which has been, you may notice, taken into Twisted now. And a lot of those were steampunk minis, so we had a little range of minis already. So we utilise those. That's the starting point. Is we've got a bunch of minis we can already use for this game, which saves resculpting stuff, saves a lot of effort. And it's also kind of interesting genre as well. I quite like the steampunk in that it's got, as a designer of a game, it allows you access to both fantasy and sci-fi elements. So you're sort of not locking yourself into one or the other. You've got a bit of both. That whole Victorian era has got a whole bunch of fun things you can play around with. A lot of mythology around it to do with Frankenstein, all these sort of weird sort of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, all these weird kind of characters that are great. And honestly, there weren't many games in that genre, and we knew of. There were two, I think I was aware of at the time. I thought it'd be a fun thing just to try, and it also suited a small scale thing where you had lots of terrain, lots of detail, that sort of stuff. That's kind of like the idea.
Right. Yeah. When I was looking up when you had agreed to come on here, I was looking up steampunk games, and yeah, I didn't see a whole lot that I guess kind of.
There's about 3 or 4, I think, now.
Right. I mean, I know that there's card games. I mean, there's a few like board games, but as far as like an actual skirmish game or like a role playing or fighting game, yeah, there didn't appear to be too many on the market.
No, not a lot. Not a lot. Yeah. It's a kind of I guess it's there must be a reason for that, and I think it's probably because it's a bit of a niche area as well. Like people like to like fantasy or sci-fi. That's what they want, and steampunk is kind of one that fits between the two of them. So yeah, it's a bit of a niche, but it's kind of fun. It allows you a lot of interesting designs for characters as well. A lot of that's a lot of what Sebastian and I like was designing fun models and making them look pretty as well as functional. And the steampunk thing gives you that whole sort of high Victorian, big hats and feathers and things like that. And the steampunk allows you to bolt on sort of more hard-edged mechanical stuff, which makes it interesting. Some fun designs going on.
Apparently, you've got one of your, I guess if you want to call it a war band, that's kind of looks like it's based on the Wizard of Oz.
So yes, the Oz
Dorothy
crew,
and Toto.
Yeah, we did that one. That's one of our more recent releases. It's just a small, almost like a sub-faction of a group called the Guild of Harmony, who are one of the factions we play. So they operate as kind of mercenaries or as their own faction if you want them to. But yeah, we kind of grabbed that fun little bit of the Tin Man and Toto and Scarecrow and that and ran with it as game models, and they came out really well.
Right.
Dorothy had existed in Sebastian's Guild of Harmony range as an older woman, but we thought we'd just revisit her as like a kid, like she's in the books, and that was fun. So yeah, they came out really well. They've been popular, those ones.
Yeah, we got some comments coming in. Rockham rocks, and the sculpts are pretty solid. Both of those came from a guy that's in our gaming group. His name's Sig Lee.
Thanks, Sig.
And he's watching. And another guy, James Biston, he said he's gonna have to check this one out. He says he loves steampunk settings.
Oh yeah, please do.
Yeah, and someone also, my buddy Sig, they also borrow from a variety of mythic backgrounds.
Yeah. We've got all sorts of elements in there. Well, that's one of the reasons the game's called Twisted is that we thought we would grab existing characters to a degree and twist them into a steampunk setting. So it's one of the drivers of the name is this thing we tend to do where we grab a character that everyone kind of knows or is aware of and just twist it a little bit and give it a steampunk feel. So it's kind of interesting that way.
Right. So like we're talking about the different characters and everything. How do you decide, you and your team, how do y'all decide like what abilities, fit this particular character?
Yeah. Well, let's take for example, say Haystack, one of the guys in the in Toto's crew or the Oz crew, as we discussed earlier. He's actually our version of the Scarecrow. So for him, for instance, the first thing you do when you decide a character is obviously come up with some sort of idea of what you want him to look like, get some concept art drawn up. Usually that starts with me just sketching it quickly, and then we'll pass it off to a professional artist if we need to get it tidied up a bit more and get some more input on it. And from that point, you kind of decide the personality of the character, because Twisted's really character driven. It's all about the personality of these models. As I referred to earlier, my interest in gaming has always just been in the character of the people that are fighting, not so much the actual fight itself or who wins. It's kind of like, this is a great story, I love it.
Right.
So looking at Haystack, I wanted him to be. A lot of this idea actually came from a chap by the name of Craig Clark, who works for Miniature Scenery. They make wargaming scenery, and Craig's their lead designer, and he had a lot to do with they do a range of twisted buildings, which we love. But he's really creative and come up with this weird idea of the Scarecrow being this kind of hay-filled madman who actually likes fire. So he kind of he enjoys the fact he enjoys burning things. Hey, he's a nutbag. So to that end, we gave Haystack flamethrower, this massive flamethrower, which can, is unpleasant.
Yeah.
I also like the idea of him, whilst he likes fire, if he gets burnt, he goes a bit berserk, and then we'll just attack whoever just burnt him. So he does that, which is fun. He has an ability called Disturbing, which makes, when you attack him, you roll off against his it's a life check, if I remember rightly. And if you fail that, then you actually fight worse, because he's just a bit unsettling to fight. He's just a bit weird and far too cheerful for somebody who looks so demonic. He's flammable, so if you get him in fire, he takes more damage than he otherwise would. So he's kind of a bit of a weakness. He has a fun ability called Stand and Deliver, which means that if you attack him from the front, like we can see you when you're charging, he's just going to flame you as you come in. So don't do that unless you have to. He also has an ability called Stern, which means he takes less damage from each hit. So he's quite hard to kill, but he's vulnerability, things like that. And then from that point, you've got a basic sort of matrix of the character built up, and you using the abilities to push his character forward. So you're giving him stuff that supports what you want him to be. Often, because I don't know how many abilities there are now. There's probably about maybe even close to 100 different abilities. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't counted them up, but if we need to develop a new one, we'll do that just to make sure that the character has the ability he needs. So most characters have at least one ability that no one else has at this point. Some don't, but most do. And then, of course, you've got these stats as well. The speed, the strength, the finesse, the attack values, the defense, the armor, etc. You can also use that to build character into them.
And that comes into the character checks where you have to, you make the roll for the character, for that particular character check.
Yeah, most rolls in Twisted in attacks and checks of most sorts are 20-sided dice. So it's a big dice with a lot of swing in it, as we all know. But what it allows me to do as a designer is use a bigger variation of numbers in the stats. If you're using a D6, you're kind of limited to a range of between 1 and 3 before it becomes a little bit impractical. With using a D20, I can go as high as even 10 if I really wanted to, and still have somebody with a stat of say 2 would have a chance of beating that person with a stat of 10, but not much chance. They'd have a chance though.
Right.
And that's kind of the thing is that you can make somebody on paper massively much stronger than somebody else, or massively better at fighting at somebody else, but it still means that person who is the worst of the two still has a chance, which is one of the things I love a lot about Confrontation, for instance, as a war game. I mentioned that one earlier, the French game. They had this mechanic in that called double sixing, whereas when you were fighting an enemy model, no matter how tough it was, if you rolled 2 6s when you're attacking it, you killed it.
Oh, wow.
So there's always this chance that your little lowly Griffin conscript against a massive aberration, this huge monster, could just kill it because he just aced it. And I kind of like that feeling that nobody, no matter how insignificant on the table, is useless. I think in games like 40K and whatnot, a single Gretchen against a Space Marine, just forget it. You got no chance. But I like the idea that Gretchen might just find a chink in that Space Marine's armor and just stick his knife somewhere it shouldn't be.
Right.
So that's kind of where I come from.
I got you. Yeah. We've got Mac, who he said hello, Peter, and I don't know if you can see the comments on yours or not.
No.
But then he also posted one of the Facebook groups for Twisted. So he posted that. So that's out there.
Thanks, mate.
That's out there as well.
Yep.
Let's see. So the mechanics of the game. I mean, are there any really unique? We've kind of been talking about it a little bit, but any unique mechanics of the game?
Yeah, there are some things we consider unique. Probably the biggest of those is the game itself is built around the sort of the backstory behind the game is this device called the engine. If you know
right.
It's like a steampunk AI. So it runs the world and has remained kind of secret. It just doesn't really want to be known. It just influences things in tiny or large ways depending on what it wants to do. But in the base set, the faction of the Dickensians actually found what's called a node of the engine, which is like one of its access points. And they started to fiddle around with that thing. It's had pretty bad results for them initially. once again twisting them into these new shapes that they are now. But the engine doesn't want to be fanned, so it's called its servants of the engine to protect it and sort these Dickensians out. So the engine does play a part in the game though through a deck of cards called the engine deck.
Right. Yeah.
The engine cards here. Yeah. So each turn, both sides get the engine card, which represents the engine's attention on the battle at that point. These can be good or bad for you or your opponent, depending on. Well, not for you necessarily, because you probably wouldn't pay a bad one on yourself. But if you, for instance, I'm looking at one of them here, one called actually, this one. So stop motion, for instance, when you play the engine card, all effects have a duration of more than one turn end immediately. It cancels every effect on the table that has a duration. So basically, it ends every ongoing effect on the table. So that's one card you can get. And these things, because both sides have one, and some of them you might play on yourself, some of them might make your guys better, some make your opponents worse, some just have this weird effect that is different. This represents the engine taking an interest in what's going on and changing things to help itself or help one side or the other benefit its plans. Its plans may be that one faction wins or the other. It may just change its mind halfway through the battle. So no, I want you to win there. Another thing we have is the engine is also represented by a counter called the favour of the engine. So when you're fighting the battle, this counter is rest with one side or the other. When you hold that counter, you have a couple of cool things that you do. At the start of each turn, when you draw your the engine cards, you get two of them rather than one. You can pick which one you want to keep, so it gives you a bit more flexibility that way. Right. It gives you a reroll once a turn, which you can use for anything. It can be any roll at any time, even after results are shown. It's just the engine going, no, I didn't want that to happen. I want this to happen. Which could be good or bad for you. If you reroll worse than your original roll, obviously it's not good. The other thing it does is obviously with combat being what I could call opposed roll, so you roll your attack and your opponent rolls their defense. So you both have a active role in combat, which is nice. If those rolls are tied, which obviously they potentially can be, and you hold the favour of the engine, you win. An interesting mechanic, which I always really like, is in the rulebook of Twister. There are rules or guidelines for playing with more than two players. So you've got to play 3 or 4 players. You can do that. If you hold favour of the engine and 2 other players on the table draw, you decide which of them wins, which is kind of fun. So these are the engine cards get used. Like I say, once a turn you draw them. The deck remains on the table during the turn though, and at any point during the turn, when one of your models or characters is affected by anything, so whether you get attacked or you're attacking or someone casts a spell on you, whatever it might be, you can choose to draw the top card. It's called Tempting Fate. So that card then applies to your model. So, for instance, look at a card here, which is one called Direct Displacement. So in display of whimsy and malice, the engine alters reality, moving people about to suit itself. So say you're being attacked in close combat. You didn't want to be attacked in close combat. You just draw this card. And normally what that means, as a normal engine card, is every opposing character must make a finesse check or be scattered in a random direction, so it reorganises the opponent's force, which is a pain in the butt for them. If you draw it as a Tempt Fate card, you're affected by it because you're drawing it yourself. So it means you suddenly scatter, which is, in this case, quite good for you. Yeah. There's another one here called Wither and Die, where the events are transpiring the engine doesn't like. It's not beyond killing those it currently is like. So if you draw that as a Tempt Fate card, for instance, you make a finesse check or you take damage. So you suddenly made yourself worse for yourself by Tempting Fate. That's why Tempting Fate is called that.
Right.
The other thing it has going on is on each engine card is a little icon. It's red or green, depending on whether it's a kind of good or a bad card, I guess you would call it. As a Tempt Fate card, that is. If you have favour of the engine, you draw a Tempt Fate card that's got a red icon on it, you lose favour of the engine to your opponent. So that's kind of unpleasant. Other ways you can lose the favour of the engine through re-rolling and failing, which loses it to your opponent, or then playing a card called the Eye is Elsewhere, which cancels any ongoing Eye of the Engine cards and takes the favour of your opponent. So it's kind of fun that way. That's one of the main uniquenesses about the game, I think, is the engine cards, and in fact, it's almost like a third player in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I was reading about the engine, and like even in
Mm,
the rule book,
mm.
like there's so much mystery, I guess,
Yeah.
around the
We
engine. So
never really
like
explain what it is or what it wants.
right, so it's like you're either your war band, if that's what I guess
Mm,
that's what your band of characters.
yeah,
You're either you're fighting for control of it, or I guess you're
yeah,
just defending it. You don't even know what
yeah.
you're really defending.
No, exactly. The servants of the engine's leader, Nouveau. Um, he's kind of the engine's representative on Earth, as it will. But even he doesn't really know what it wants. He's just sort of told what to do. It's kind of like this mysterious, kind of like a secret service almost that just gets, you know, gets its servants to do what it wants without really telling them why they're doing it. He's currently obedient to the engine and will do what it says, but that might change if he suddenly decides that it's not what it wants. One of the things I
Right,
like to do, one of the things I like with any game, and particularly with Twisted, is that none of the factions are all bad or all good. So you can't
right.
say the Dickensians are an evil faction. So most of them are evil. Don't get me wrong. Nancy
Yeah.
or Bill Sykes.
Well, one thing that caught my attention too, reading
Mm,
through the rule book, was like it even
mm,
said like you may work for the engine, but
mm.
you may not necessarily like always be in its favor.
No, exactly.
So, and I guess
Might,
that comes into play with
yeah,
the deck. So I
yeah,
guess
exactly. Yeah, it might have a reason that it wants the servants to fail at that moment. We don't know what that reason is, but it may say, well, no, perhaps at the minute I'm better off long term. The Dickensians won this one because there's a reason that it's 6 months down the track before it shows itself. But that's an interesting plan. The other group that's involved with the engine a bit is the Guild of Harmony. It's one of the other faction I mentioned earlier.
right,
Um, they are aware of the engine as a faction, and they're kind of like I guess, for want of a better term, sort of a band of like-minded mercenaries to some degree, and they have different philosophies. There are three different groups within that group, and they have different philosophies about dealing with the engine. One wants to just see it left alone and undiscovered and unknown about. That's their theory. Another one wants to use its power for their own benefit. Another one wants to learn as much about it so that they can defray its problems. So it's kind of fun that way. Every group has a different view of the engine and what they should do with it.
right. Um, I'd sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. I was trying
That's
to
all
do
right.
something. I was trying to get the shot directly on you while you were talking there.
Mm,
But so there's been I've got a question. There have been an explosion in tabletop gaming at big
mm,
publishers and at the indie level.
yep.
Do you have any advice for people who may have a passion to see a game, come to fruition?
Look, it's a long process, so don't expect it to be quick by any means. It took us from initial idea to getting Twisted out in the shops around 3 to 4 years. So writing the rules took around about 2 years, a pretty constant slog. It's probably the hardest work actually that comes after you release the game. That's the trickiest bit. Writing it's reasonably and developing it is reasonably easy because you're in control. You know exactly what you're doing, and there's no one no one else involved. It's up to you to do what you want to do, and you just go ahead and do it. Once you've released the game, it then becomes a matter of convincing other people that it's worth looking at and playing, which is the hardest bit. We're doing really well at the moment with that. A lot of our guys, like Mac, who's just spoke before, Alan and Adam in the US, are great at sort of taking it and running with it and pushing it along, which has really been appreciated. It's kind of that kind of interaction with the fans, which I like so much as well. That's kind of good. Probably another thing I'd suggest is to get as much advice as you can while you're doing it. We were really lucky to early on the piece we did Salute, the big London game show. We just went there and just showed off what we had at the time. Some of the guys did Depticon as well, which is also really cool. We'd like to do it again, but it's just been a matter of time/money at the moment.
Right.
But we were lucky enough to hook up there with Jake Thornton. I don't know if you know who he is. He used to edit White Dwarf magazine for Games Workshop.
Okay.
And we got a link to hook up with him, and about 12 months after that, I contacted him. So look, we could do with some help on this game because I was a bit bogged at the time. I said, can you assist? And he said, yeah, well, sure. He was happy just to lend us his eyes as an experienced games designer. He made a few changes here and there, but mostly it was just his input was to influence me in pushing myself into the areas that he thought I needed to go. Things like dropping mechanics that weren't working. He said, look, take a look at this mechanic. I don't think it works all that well. I don't know. He didn't offer a solution so much. He just said, look at it and just assess it again. And sure enough, his experience told that the mechanic he looked at the time machine, I can't remember what it was now. He said, take it out and try the game without it. And it worked better without it. It was one of those ones that I was really locked into at the time because it seemed like such an important thing. So that's another bit of advice, is to don't be afraid to drop stuff that isn't working.
Right.
Sometimes, you're pulling back from what you think is the best idea because it's the first idea you thought of, and re-looking at it again, having got rid of it altogether, is really worthwhile. And that's all a bit of streamlining you can do occasionally. I tend to overcomplicate things a bit, and I still do. So you've got to try and pull back from your tendencies as a designer to design what you want to what players would actually prefer, which is interesting. So that's about what I reckon.
We had somebody. That's good. That's good advice for those that are trying to get into it. I mean, people, I guess they always have ideas. It's just maybe putting that pen to paper, putting it all down, and you can't be afraid of rejection.
No, you can't, and you've got to think about it as a almost like building a house to some degree. Is that you've got to build the structure of the game to start with. One of the things where I kind of lost and got bogged down a little bit at one point was I was developing multiple parts of the rule set at any given time. I was getting the movements like this, and then combat. You sort of tend to just move on and just do weird things. And one of the things Jake said at the time was, start with the book with all the pages in it. I said, well, I haven't got them written yet. He said, well, don't worry about that. Just put them in. This is all combat. This is all movement. Then you know where you're going, what you've got to fill in.
Right.
At the moment, you're just sort of working in this weird kind of unstructured way that it becomes very difficult to know where to go next. That was really helpful. Once you got that down, you start at the start, and you said, with what you need to play the game through to basic terms that are used in the game, the way you understand the meaning of immediate, for instance, or the way you should look at averaging dice on this game, or halving dice. All that stuff just gets you thinking. And once you've cleared that all up, it's easy. The process falls into line.
Yeah, I look at it. I guess I'm a high school coach, so even though I may want to, I know it may be a little different, but even though I may want to beat my competitor, I'm not opposed to always asking for their advice or how they ran a certain play. So that's kind of like you're seeking their advice on how to make, how can I make this team better, or game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I'm looking at it like, how can I make my team better? Maybe this will work or it won't work. So I try to always kind of make that connection.
And most people seem quite happy to advise you. I haven't yet found anyone.
Yeah, the thing is, I look at it this way too. Like, they've been there before,
exactly.
So they looked up to people. So like you're seeking advice, and in turn, maybe you hope somebody reaches out to you one day, and they've got a game idea, so they reach out to you to kind of get that ball rolling. So
always happy to help with that sort of thing. It's always fun to see what someone else is doing as well.
Right. Yeah, it's like a fraternity of of people just helping each other.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So I got Sig. Sig made a comment. He said, "Woot woot, Adeptus Windy City alumni." So he's from Chicago. So
cool.
Anyway. So but anyway, folks, Tyler Peck here with Peter Overton, co-creator of Twisted. Feel free to leave any comments or questions. He's sitting down, just talking about his game and gaming background, and just answering a couple questions that I had. So this is just kind of a silly question.
Yep.
And actually, Sid kind of helped me come up with this one. But you're sitting down at the table to play a game. Name 3 people, living or dead, that you would play with.
Okay. Well, I had a bit of a ponder about this one.
If you want to think about it, and we come back.
No. I've got answers. Okay. I've got 1 dead and 2 living.
Okay.
My dead one would be Gary Gygax, creator of D&D. I think that would be fascinating to actually play a game with him in the way he intended it to be played, because I'm fairly certain we don't play it that way. Right. I'd love to see what his idea of how the game should be played, whether by level of seriousness, for instance. The group I play with, we just tend to have fun with it.
Right. Yeah, we do too.
Whereas I kind of wonder if he would go, oh, that's not right. You're meant to be a bit more serious about this thing. That would be fascinating. The other guy I'd like to sit down and play a game with, just to have a chat as much as anything else, is Jess Goodwin from Games Workshop. His art particularly has been a bit of inspiration throughout my years of gaming, painting. He designed the Eldar mostly. A lot of the 40k stuff actually. It's just brilliant. Clever man. I only met him once at a games day. Seemed like a nice chap.
Right.
But it was nice to have a bit of a longer chat to him than the few moments I had with him, where he signed my demon, which I'm pretty happy about. Another guy I'd like to play with, just because the hell it looks like fun, would be Will Wheaton. We've all seen him on his show, Tabletop. It just looks like it'd be cracking going to have a game with him. So that'd be the 3. And I think all 3 together would be fun. Yeah,
that would be cool.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine, Max, he asked, do you target specific audiences with your game? So like age groups or casual versus hardcore?
Look, we don't target them as such. I wouldn't say we've ever really thought about who would be the target for Twisted, because the target for Twisted is essentially me. You
made the game just for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, I figured I like to play this. There'll be somebody else out there that likes it as well, I'm sure. So yeah, the game is certainly targeted at. Well, if it's targeted is the right word. That you're more casual gamer. It's never been designed with particularly competitive play in mind. Sure, you can play it to win. That's fine, and that's great. But I never really thought about it in terms of being a super hyper balanced game like say 40k or say Flames of War. Those sort of things are where balance and everything being even is the important bit. But Twisted's all about the story. So if you get pantsed by a stronger force because they're stronger because of reasons, just enjoy it. And there are some good stories come out of being pantsed occasionally.
Right.
Yeah. You just got to ask the British Army in the Zulu War, for instance. They got thrashed, but some cracking stories out of it.
Yeah. So you've mentioned Sebastian a couple times.
Yep.
So how did y'all meet? How did y'all decide to, I guess, collaborate together on this project?
Okay. I'd known Seb for a little while. I couldn't say we knew him well. Because we both were miniature painters. Seb's background is miniature painting and sculpting, so he's one of the best miniature painters in the world as far as I'm concerned. He's absolutely brilliant, 10 times better than I am. I kind of met him at Golden Demons, that sort of thing, because he lives in Sydney and I live in Melbourne, which is quite a way apart. It's a few hundred, a good day's drive from each other. So I wouldn't see him more often than once a year. But the chap Adam, who started the idea of this magazine, which I mentioned earlier, put together this little crew, which is myself, because on my day job, my main income is from working in the printing industry, so I know about printing. So because you talk about a magazine, he said, well, you were doing printing. Seb's a good painter. I'm a good painter as well. And these other 2 guys were good painters as well. So we all met up in Sydney to have a chat about that. And that's when Twisted came up.
Okay.
So look, before that point, I'd say that Seb and I knew each other, but not particularly well. Obviously, since that time, we've worked together for a long time now, so about 4 or 5 years, 6 years.
So do y'all live a lot closer together now, or are y'all still?
No. He's still in Sydney.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I'm not sure what the actual distance from Melbourne to Sydney is. Just for the American chaps who might know. Quickly Google it.
Oh, you don't have to do that.
Yeah. Wait a second. Melbourne. Yeah, distance from Melbourne to Sydney. It is 878 kilometres, which is whatever that is in miles. It's a long way.
Yeah, I don't know the conversion. I'm sure someone watching will let us know. 178 kilometers. How many miles is that? Mac, look that up for us. And Mac does have a question, which actually was one of mine, and I was going to leave it till the end, but I'll go on and ask it now. So, like, what is the future for Twisted? And he's kind of asking, like, when is the next Kickstarter?
Okay. Well, there was due to be a small one, well, about now.
Right.
But circumstances, as we're all aware of, have sort of defrayed that. It was really just it was only a very small Kickstarter we were looking at, just for production of some minis. Got some bigger stuff in the wings, some large models that require quite a deal of setup cost, in terms of them being like big miniatures, so they need expensive molds, etc., etc. Whilst we're doing okay, we're not a flush company. We've got millions of dollars like Games Workshop to throw at stuff. So we're just going to do a small Kickstarter just to fund the production of these minis, which would be awesome. Given circumstances, and this is actually a lot of Mac's work, is we're working on developing some solo rules for Twisted so that you can play it yourself on your own. That's only in the early stages now. I think I wrote maybe half a dozen pages of the rules so far.
Okay.
That'll be interesting. Like I said, Mac's had a big hand in this one. So he's been playing on his own because, well, he had to. So gaming partners couldn't do anything else. And he sent me like his notes on what he played. So that's a clever idea. We'll run with that.
Right.
So we're just looking at it at the moment. That's still, like I said, it's still heavily under development, but it's an interesting twist on the game.
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. It'll involve changing a bunch of mechanics because things will need to change a bit for that. But it will be fun. It'll be fun. I think it'll be good, and it will allow us to sort of advance the storyline a little bit as well of the world, which is useful. I always like that. Each add-on for the game that we've done, which is primarily at the moment just the faction books for the Guild of Harmony and the Scions of the Sand, the Egyptian-based faction we have, has always advanced the storyline just a fraction.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And Mac said it's 110 miles.
Oh, there we go.
Almost 2 hours. So I guess almost 2 hours.
Hang on. 110 miles. Some miles. What does it say here? My Google says 545 miles, Mac.
He's off then. I don't know. Anyway,
that's a long way. Anyway, yeah.
Yep. And then a guy that's in our group, Mike Baker, he said he loves steampunk.
Oh,
so I actually went to we had visited both of us and our wives had visited a friend of ours in the hospital a couple of years ago, and we ended up at this steampunk restaurant for dinner. Yeah. So it was actually really cool. I mean, yeah, it was really cool. I can't even remember the name of it. I'd have to look it up. But we kind of walked in and we're like, oh man, this is awesome. Yeah. So kind of getting back to, I guess, you were talking about things kind of being under development. How hard is it now? Especially with, I guess, this world pandemic, how hard is it now with how does your team, I guess your quote unquote team, collaborate? Or is it y'all are all online doing like a video chat kind of like this?
Yeah, it's actually nothing new for us because Seb and I will only rarely get together as a physical presence. Usually, at the moment, it's usually once a year. It's sort of at a convention in Canberra, which is near Sydney, called CanCon. We used to catch up there once a year and just have a chat. But most of the time, we just email each other or chat on the phone. Gotcha. And that seems to work okay because we've sort of got this separation of roles to some degree. I'm almost exclusively rules development and backstory development. Seb's almost exclusively design and sculpting of miniatures. So there's kind of this natural division that you don't need to talk all the time.
Right.
But it's useful to chat occasionally, obviously, but it's not entirely necessary for us to produce what we produce.
I got you. Now he, like you said, so he does the manufacturing of the models himself. Y'all don't outsource it, or?
Well, we do outsource some of the sculpting. Seb will sculpt them when he feels the desire to do so.
Okay.
A lot of them are sculpted by European sculptors because they're awesome. And that's always fun, But yeah, he'll handle all that and all the production of them, the casting and whatnot, which is as much as possible done locally here. We have an excellent metal caster in Eureka Miniatures in Melbourne near me. I think Nick's one of the best metal casters in the world. He can do a remarkably good job. We've got a guy in Brisbane, which is further north in Australia, doing the resin casting. Okay. And he's astounding as well. Even down to things like we got a model Jacko Jurgens, this little sort of pumpkin-headed Durkin guy. He's got these machine guns on his shoulders, very thin barrels, only maybe a millimetre and a half thick. So I was really concerned with those in resin, going, "Oh, is it going to work? It'll be snapping every 5 seconds." And the caster has managed to get wire in those gun barrels in every single model.
Okay, so
they won't break.
Yeah, that's amazing. As Sig said earlier, I mean, the sculpts on those miniatures, because I've been looking at, I mean, they are just such great detail.
They're all hand sculpted as well, or mostly. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 in the range that we've done digitally for a while. It was only ever a exploration we did of that, and didn't like the process very much of digital sculpting.
Right. Yeah. Those things are amazing. And that's what Mac just said. He said they're some of the best he's ever assembled.
Good.
And as for those that know, and you may know a little bit, but Mac does a lot of building miniatures and painting. He does multiple videos, and he builds a ton of terrain. So that was one thing that I was gonna talk to you about, terrain. I was looking in the rules. And it's kind of like you encourage a lot of terrain for this game. It's like up to 50% of the table you want covered.
Quite a lot.
So, and y'all have got terrain available on your website through a MDF company.
Miniature Scenery. They do a specific range that was designed for Twisted during the Kickstarter. Really good stuff. It's I think it's available in the US too. They have a US distributor. Not sure who it is now though. But you have to go onto their website. It'll tell you all their gear.
Mac will probably be able to tell us in a second.
There's a guy in the state. They have basically a US manufacturing hub. So, but the stuff they produce for the game is lovely. It's brilliantly designed by Craig, and it's super easy to build. Super good kits. And it has everything we wanted in the terrain, which is lots of levels, lots of things to climb up, fall off, run through.
Right. That's what I was reading. And you kind of you encourage, I guess maybe like walkways across buildings, which is kind of cool.
Exactly. Things you can do. One of the fun things which is in the rules is the way you can interact with terrain, insofar as if there's a static piece of terrain like a building, which has got is just a square block of MDF or whatever, essentially.
Right.
The rules allow you to break into that building and move through it, coming out a door on the far side if there's one there. So it's a couple of checks to do that to get through. One of the fun things about it is if you fail one of the checks on the way through the building, somebody inside the building's a bit pissed off that you've broken into their house. kind of whacked you with a pot or stabbed you on the way through and take a bit of damage on the way out. So it's kind of fun, all that kind of thing, And you can imagine like a Victorian London being quite enclosed, kind of narrow streets and little alleyways and squares and things. That's the kind of thing you want to think of, is that kind of that closeness.
Right. Yeah, I read too. You want a lot of like nooks and crannies.
The more stuff you can hide in, the better. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You'll notice that by and large, if you look sort of at the characters, the range of weapons is quite short in general. You find that your gun ranges. I think the longest one so far is 20 inches, which is Lancelot's rifle, the lance.
Oh wow.
But most of them ended about say 12 to 15 inches, and that's designed with the terrain in mind. Is that you don't need this gun that'll reach across the table if you don't have that sort of line of sight, and keeping weapons short like that also has the advantage of encouraging close combat to some degree. It kind of puts you to shoot somebody effectively. You've got to be close enough to them they might be able to attack you.
Right.
Which is kind of fun.
Yeah. One thing, you mentioned the close combat. I saw where, in the rule book, you I guess the only way you get into close combat is if your bases actually end up touching, because otherwise you just move or you have like a long ranged attack.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
right.
You get into the close combat if you.
Yeah, once you touch their base, you kind of fight. Well, near enough. If it's,
right.
The model doesn't allow it, you kind of always can't quite get in that bit because his arm's in the way. Then it's
right.
close combat. Judge it yourself, but you know what I mean. Basically, you need to touch them, to get in. So you need to sort of move in as well. You can charge in, but it's got to be a straight line, which is a double move. So other than that, you've got to move in with a single action. So each character has 2 actions a turn, which can be to move or shoot and move or cast a spell or whatever. It doesn't matter what order you do them in. You can do the same one twice if you want to. So you can shoot and shoot or move and move.
Yeah.
Cast a spell and cast another spell. Doesn't matter what you do. Close combat itself isn't an action. It just occurs when you get into base.
Right. Yeah, I remember that too. Yeah, it's not necessarily an action. It just happens as the result of
another of actions. Yeah. So if you're in close combat, you still have 2 actions. You can't necessarily use them, but you have them.
Right.
So if one of your abilities requires an action, some abilities require an action to use, some don't. They're called passive or active abilities. So if you have an ability that requires an action, you can use it in close combat, assuming it's relevant, and you've got an action. So it's kind of interesting that way. Is that whilst you're still fighting, you've still got stuff you can do, and you can still use these little devices we call Dr. Disraeli's delights. These little, almost like magic items you can get when you get an imbalance in points in a game. So you're playing a 200-point game, one of you's at 200 and one's at 198. You can fill that 2 points up with these little delights, which are little functional things that allow you pluses to hit or just other funny little things, healing devices. So you can use those as well.
Right. Yeah, Mac did actually look it up for us, or he knew off the top of his head, but Every Little War is the company.
Yep.
So, and he provided the link.
Sweet. Thanks, Mac.
Yeah. So thanks, Mac. You've been awesome. So folks, we're coming up on about 50 minutes. Again, I'm here with Peter. He's co-creator of Twisted Steampunk Skirmish game. I can see we've got some viewers. So if any of y'all have any questions or would like to make a comment, please do so. Otherwise, we will kind of wrap this thing up. Again, I want to thank Peter for his time.
No worries, man.
So it's about 10 in the morning there, almost 10 in the morning there, I believe.
Yeah, 10 to 10,
yeah. If my math correct.
Also, must mention this, in the US, Discover Games are our stockist. So if you need any Twister stuff, go to them first.
Yeah, Discover Games, they're in near Atlanta or in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So
they've got almost everything. So or possibly do have everything. So anything you need, given circumstances, or even just because they're in the US, order from them rather than us.
Right. Then I also had the you're at Demented Games.
Yep.
.com. I had that up there. So there's the website for that, folks. Also, there's a couple of Facebook pages out there. I didn't provide the links for those, but I believe Mac did earlier.
Yeah.
There's Facebook groups out there to follow the game.
Yeah. You can also download all the rules for free off limitedgames.com.
Yes.
They're all available there as files.
Yeah, it's got all the files for the different rules. It's got the products, history, different things like that, all on the website. And the artwork I don't know who did the artwork in the rule book, but that was some beautiful paintings, drawings, whatever you want to call them.
We hired some good guys. Some local Australian chaps and a couple of European guys. It was fun.
All right. So we'll wait a few more minutes, folks. See if you've got any questions. Again, we've got a few people viewing. So if you have any last questions for Peter, please do so. We'll just kind of see what. So see what's going on. I don't think I missed any that anybody asked.
Yeah, really.
And what I can do is I'll when this is over, I can share it to the Twisted Facebook page.
Yeah, feel free. Yep,
yeah, if you want to, I can. Because I'll end up downloading it to YouTube as well.
Yep.
So I can send you the YouTube link, and I'll put it on the Twisted page as well.
Fantastic. Yep.
Yep. So yeah, somebody let me look and see who it was. It shows up as Facebook user on StreamYard, but then on Facebook, Sig, my buddy Sig. Any other indie projects in gaming you follow or want to promote?
Look, I can't think of anything right at the minute. Not in the way of indie stuff. I do the guys at Mana Press do some really nice stuff with a game called Tribal. It's quite a simple little war game. It's kind of, as the name suggests, to do with tribal combat. So Polynesian and native tribes fighting one another, which is kind of fun. We've yet to have a game of it that looks good.
Right.
But I know the guy Ara that wrote it really well. He's a nice guy. So there's some interesting stuff in the wings. And there's another little project we're working on as Demented Games, which is still well under development that I'm not going to mention just yet. But it takes some of my earliest gaming influences and bolts them into sort of another game, which still heavily under development. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. That might take a while yet.
Yeah, well, whenever you when y'all are further along in the development stage, if you want to come back on, I'd love to have you back on, and
cool, anytime
we can talk about it. So, well, all right, folks. Again, this has been Peter, co-creator of Twisted. You can find it on dementedgames.com. There's Discovery Games in Atlanta here in the U.S. You can look them up on Facebook as well. And again, Peter, I appreciate your time so much.
Very much.
And you have a good one.
Okay, see you, mate. Bye-bye.
All right, see you, man. Bye.